The millionaire married her to ruin her, until her gentle kiss awakened a jealousy he couldn't control. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. She didn't know the knock on her thin apartment door that morning would change her life forever. The building hallway smelled like old carpet and burnt coffee, and she was still half asleep when she pulled the door open. And there he stood, Damian Wolf, the youngest self-made millionaire in the state. Towering, impeccably dressed, eyes cold enough to make her breath hitch. She had only seen him once before, across a courtroom hallway, when her father was dragged out in handcuffs. She had no idea why a man like Damian would ever come here, to this crumbling complex on the edge of town. Until he spoke. "Marry me," he said, placing a thick envelope into her hand like it weighed nothing. "Consider it a contract." Her heart lurched. What kind of joke is this? He didn't blink. Not a joke. A transaction. She opened the envelope with shaking fingers. Inside, a marriage contract, a check large enough to clear every medical bill her mother had ever collected, and instructions for a courthouse appointment at 9 a.m. tomorrow. "Why me?" she whispered. Damian's jaw flexed once, the only sign of emotion. "Your father owes me more than he can ever repay. So you're punishing me? I'm giving you a choice." She looked down at the check again, the ink still fresh. Rent was overdue. Her mother needed treatment she couldn't afford. She worked double shifts at a diner and still barely managed to keep the lights on. A choice? No. It was a lifeline, even if it came from the devil. She swallowed hard. "What would you want from me?" His answer was immediate. 3 months. You attend events as my wife. You smile when needed. You don't interfere in my life or ask questions about my business. Her voice trembled. "And after 3 months? We divorce. Cleanly. You walk away with enough money to rebuild your life." She felt something inside her crumble, but she nodded. "Fine. I'll sign." For the first time, something flickered in his eyes. Not warmth, but relief sharpened with bitterness. He handed her a pen. "Good," he murmured. "This is the beginning of the end." She didn't know he meant the end of his revenge, the end of his control, the end of the cold walls he'd spent years building. She didn't know that one gentle kiss, still months away, would shatter every intention he came here with. But in that moment, only one truth filled the room. A poor girl had just agreed to marry a millionaire who didn't want love, only destruction. And he believed she would break long before he did. He had no idea how wrong he was. The courthouse air felt too clean, too bright, like the world refused to match the chaos spinning inside her. Less than 24 hours ago, she had been standing in her dim hallway holding a contract she never thought she would sign. Now she stood beside Damian Wolf, her brand new husband, while a bored clerk stamped their paperwork. No bouquet, no family, no rings exchanged, just the sharp click of a stamp sealing a future she did not choose. "Congratulations," the clerk muttered without looking up. Damian slid the papers away and touched the small of her back lightly, guiding her toward the exit as if escorting a stranger through a hotel lobby. She felt the contact like ice. Outside, his black sedan waited at the curb, polished enough to mirror her uncertainty. The driver opened the door, and Damian gestured for her to step in. The leather seats were cold, expensive, untouched by anything human. She sank into them awkwardly, clutching her small purse like armor. Damian settled beside her with the kind of ease only old money had. But his jaw was tight, as though this moment cost him more than he would admit. The car pulled away, turning onto a broad avenue lined with glass towers. She stared out the window as the city shifted from her world to his. After a long silence, she finally whispered, "Are you always this quiet?" His eyes flicked toward her. "You signed an agreement. Silence makes it easier." "Easier for who?" Before he could answer, his phone buzzed. He accepted the call with a curt, "Yes." A woman's voice drifted through the speaker. Smooth. Confident. "You got married this morning? Tell me it is a joke." He exhaled, annoyed. "It is strategic. Does she know she is just part of your revenge?" Her stomach dropped. Damian's eyes narrowed and he ended the call abruptly, but the damage was done. He saw the way she flinched. "Do not read into that," he said. "It is business." Her voice was barely audible. "Marriage is not business." For the first time, something shifted in his expression, as if the line she had drawn surprised him. But he said nothing. The car continued in heavy silence until the skyline opened up and the Wolf Tower rose ahead, a 60-story monument of steel and glass. Her breath caught. It looked less like a building and more like a verdict. When they stepped out, she could feel eyes on her immediately. Employees in tailored suits paused mid-stride. Cameras clicked. Whispers rose like static. "Is that his wife? Where did he find her? She does not look like she belongs here." Her cheeks burned, but Damien's hand closed gently around her wrist. Not warm, not reassuring, but steady. "Do not stop walking," he murmured. His stride was purposeful as he led her through the marble lobby. Every step of her worn shoes echoed too loudly. At the private elevator, a middle-aged assistant rushed over. "Sir, the gala committee needs your approval for the guest list tonight. Your wife should also choose a gown." The word wife sounded foreign, like clothing that did not fit. Damien gave a slight nod. "Send everything to the penthouse." The elevator doors closed, swallowing them in quiet. Her heart pounded against the mirrored walls. "A gala? I do not belong at something like that." "You belong where I tell you," he said, then immediately seemed to regret the sharpness in his voice. His next words softened. "It is one of the contractual events. You only need to stand beside me." She looked away. "Is that all I am to you? A prop?" "You agreed to the terms." "Because I had no choice." The elevator chimed, saving him from answering. The doors opened into the penthouse, and she stepped into a world she had only ever seen in magazines. Floor-to-ceiling windows. A skyline stretching for miles. A silence so vast it felt like another planet. Damien spoke behind her, low and unreadable. "You will stay here for the duration of our arrangement." She turned to him slowly. "And after the arrangement?" His eyes held hers for a beat too long. "After that, you walk away." She swallowed the ache rising in her chest and nodded. But as she looked over the glittering city, one truth settled like a whisper she could not shake. Walking away would not be as easy as signing her name had been. Not with a man like Damien Wolf. And not with the storm already gathering behind his eyes. She had never seen clothing like this up close. Silk, velvet, beadwork that shimmered under the penthouse lights. Each gown laid out carefully by the assistant as if they belonged in a museum instead of a closet the size of her entire apartment. She stood frozen, arms wrapped around herself, feeling out of place next to fabrics that cost more than her annual rent. The assistant, a composed woman named Marissa, gave her a polite smile. "Mr. Wolf instructed that you choose whatever makes you comfortable." Comfortable. In a world where everything was designed to remind her she did not belong. She reached out hesitantly, her fingers brushing a deep emerald gown that felt like water against her skin, but she pulled her hand back quickly. "I should not touch anything," she murmured. "Nothing in here is meant for someone like me." Marissa softened a little, lowering her voice. "If you are his wife, then everything in this room is meant for you." The words stung more than they reassured, because she did not feel like anyone's wife. She felt like a placeholder wearing a borrowed life. She chose a simpler gown, a soft champagne color that did not demand attention. When she put it on, she barely recognized herself in the mirror. Her hair was styled, her makeup soft but polished. She looked like a woman who might belong at a millionaire's side, but the reflection felt like a stranger. Damien appeared in the doorway behind her, dressed in a black tuxedo that looked as though it had been made for him alone. She tensed when she saw him. He did not smile, but his gaze held hers for a moment longer than usual. "It suits you," he said quietly. It was not a compliment meant to charm. It felt more like an acknowledgement he had not expected to make. Before she could respond, he turned away. "The driver is waiting. We should go." The gala venue glittered from the outside, all glass and gold, laughter and music spilling into the night air long before they stepped inside. As they entered, heads turned instantly. The room shifted, like the crowd collectively inhaled. Whispers rose in small waves. "Is that really her? Damien chose her? She looks ordinary." Her spine stiffened, and she kept her gaze straight ahead. Damien felt her hesitation and placed his hand lightly on her back, guiding her forward. "Do not worry about them," he murmured without looking at her. "They talk about everyone. They talk because I do not belong," she whispered back. He paused, then leaned slightly closer. You belong because I say you do. She could not tell if the words were meant to reassure or to remind her of the contract. They reached the center of the room where business partners and investors waited like a circle of vultures draped in diamonds and tailored suits. A woman stepped forward, smiling too brightly. Raven hair, red lips, eyes that radiated calculation. Damien, she purred. You disappeared after the board meeting. I thought you were avoiding me. He kept his expression unreadable. I have been busy. The woman's gaze slid to his wife, eyes narrowing. Busy getting married, I suppose. Damien's jaw tightened slightly. This is my wife. The word wife made the woman's smile falter. She looked her up and down with slow disdain. How unexpected. Damien's wife lifted her chin, forcing her voice steady. Unexpected does not mean unworthy. The woman blinked, taken aback, and several guests around them exchanged surprised glances. Damien glanced sideways at her, a flicker of something almost like approval in his eyes. But the moment broke when another man joined the group, reaching for her hand. You must be the new Mrs. Wolf, he said warmly. Stunning. May I steal her for a moment, Damien? Damien's posture stiffened instantly. She is fine where she is, he replied. The man laughed lightly, unaware of the tension. Come on, it is just a dance. When he extended his hand toward her again, Damien stepped forward, his voice colder than the marble floor under their feet. I said she is fine. She stared at him, startled by the sudden sharpness in his tone. This was not businesslike composure. This was something else entirely, something that flickered with possessiveness he did not seem to recognize in himself. The room seemed to tilt for a moment as he placed his hand at her waist, pulling her subtly closer, claiming space that had never been part of the contract. His voice dropped low enough for only her to hear. You are my wife tonight. You stay with me. She felt her breath catch, not from fear but from the realization echoing between them. He was jealous, and he did not even know it yet. The music swelled around them, a slow, elegant melody that wrapped the ballroom in gold, but she barely heard it over the pounding in her chest as Damien guided her away from the hovering crowd. His hand stayed firm at her waist, warmer than she expected, and she could feel tension radiating through him like a wire pulled too tight. When they reached a quieter corner near the marble staircase, she finally spoke, her voice soft but steady. You did not have to do that. Damien's jaw clenched as he released her only halfway, as if some part of him refused to let go entirely. He touched you without permission, he said quietly, his tone flat but edged with something darker. She blinked. He offered his hand, Damien. People do that at galas. Not with you, he said before he could stop himself. The words hung between them, startling both of them. She stared up at him, trying to understand. Why? Because it breaks the contract. He shifted his gaze away, the muscles in his throat tightening. Because it complicates things. Her brows knit. For whom? Damien did not answer, and that silence told her more than any explanation could. She took a small step back, needing space, but his hand caught hers almost instinctively. He looked down at the connection as if surprised by his own reflex, then slowly released her fingers. We should return to the table, he murmured. People are watching. But before either of them could move, the woman from earlier reappeared, holding 2 champagne flutes and wearing a smirk that hinted she had seen more than she should have. There you are, she said brightly. I thought you two might step outside for some air. Her tone suggested a different kind of air, and her gaze lingered on the space between them like she enjoyed twisting the knife. Damien's wife forced a polite smile. We were just taking a moment. The woman's eyes gleamed. A moment? Interesting. Damien never takes moments. Business always comes first. She turned to him, tilting her head. Is this the first exception? Damien's expression chilled instantly. Do you need something, Clara? Only your attention, Clara said, stepping a little too close. And perhaps your signature on the investment memo. I left it in the boardroom. I assumed you would handle it personally. The emphasis on personally was not subtle. Damien nodded curtly. I will take care of it later. Clara arched a brow. Later? You never postpone deals, Damien. Are you sure you are not distracted? His wife saw the flicker in Damien's eyes, the barely there crack in his controlled exterior, and for the first time she wondered if Clara might be more than an irritated colleague. Clara finally shifted her attention back to the wife, running her eyes over the champagne gown as though appraising a piece of art. she did not quite approve of. You look lovely tonight, Clara said sweetly, but it was the kind of sweetness that rots. Although I must admit, you are a surprise. Damien usually chooses women who shine a little brighter. Her throat tightened, but she lifted her chin. It is fortunate, then, that Damien does not choose based on shine. Clara's smile thinned. Oh, he chooses strategically. Always. Clara leaned closer, voice low but cutting. I wonder what strategy you belong to. Damien stepped forward without hesitation, placing himself between them. Enough, Clara. Clara blinked slowly, seeming amused rather than reprimanded. Touchy tonight, are we? Damien grabbed 2 glasses from a passing tray and handed one to his wife, with deliberate calm. Enjoy the party, Clara. The dismissal was unmistakable. Clara's eyes narrowed, but she walked away, heels clicking sharply against the marble. His wife exhaled, trying to shake off the sting of the encounter. She does not like me, she murmured. Damien's brow lifted faintly. Clara does not like anyone, not even herself. Despite everything, a small laugh escaped her, quiet but real, and Damien's eyes softened just slightly, as if the sound did something unexpected to him. He reached up, adjusting a strand of hair that had slipped loose near her cheek. The touch was gentle, careful, too careful for a man who claimed this marriage meant nothing. Do not let her ruin your night, he said quietly. Why not? She whispered before she realized the question slipped out. His hand hovered near her cheek for one heartbeat longer. Because, he said, voice low, barely audible over the music, you do not deserve to be ruined. And for the first time, she wondered if he meant more than he intended. The rest of the gala blurred into soft music and crystal lights, but her mind kept replaying Damien's quiet words, the ones he had spoken before he could stop himself. You do not deserve to be ruined. It did not make sense coming from a man who married her for revenge, yet something in his tone lingered long after the music faded. When the event finally ended, Damien kept a polite hand at her back as they made their way toward the exit. Cameras flashed, reporters called his name, and he shielded her with his body in a way that felt protective rather than performative. In the car, silence settled between them, but it was not the cold silence from before. It felt warmer somehow, charged with questions neither of them dared ask. She watched the city lights streak across the windows until Damien finally spoke, his voice low and measured. You handled yourself well tonight. Better than I expected. She looked at him, surprised. That sounded almost like a compliment. Do not get used to it, he said, but the edge in his voice was softer. Back at the penthouse, she climbed out of the car and paused at the entrance, still trying to catch her breath from the whirlwind of the evening. Damien walked ahead, stopping only when he realized she was not following. He turned, expression unreadable. Are you coming inside? She hesitated. Yes. I just need a moment. He watched her for a beat, then nodded and stepped inside, leaving the door open behind him. She remained under the night sky for another minute, letting the cool air settle her nerves, then walked inside. The penthouse felt enormous after the crowded ballroom. Too quiet, too polished. Damien had removed his jacket and loosened his tie, leaning against the marble counter with a glass of water in hand. The small shift in his appearance made him look almost human, almost reachable. She took a cautious step forward. About earlier, she began. At the gala. He lifted his gaze to her. What about it? You seemed angry when that man offered to dance with me. Damien stiffened slightly, the glass pausing at his lips. I was not angry, he said. I was ensuring the contract was respected. She tried not to flinch, but her heart dropped a little. Of course. The contract. The distance between them widened again, settling into the space like a cold draft. She turned away, ready to retreat to her room, but Damien's voice stopped her. Clara was out of line, he said. You handled her better than most people do. She looked back at him. I did not want to make a scene. You did more than that, he replied. You held your ground. There was something unfamiliar in his expression, something he did not seem comfortable showing. She approached slowly. Damien, why does Clara hate me so much? His jaw tightened at the question, and he moved past her, as if needing distance from something he did not want to admit. It is complicated, he said. She followed him with her eyes. Did you two have something? He stopped walking. The silence stretched. Clara used to believe she was entitled to everything in my world, he finally said. Including me. Her stomach twisted. Was she? Damien turned around, and for the first time his voice held a hint of frustration, not at her, but at himself. She believed it. I did not encourage it. Then why did she act like I am a mistake you will correct any minute? His gaze darkened. Because Clara thinks no one is good enough for me. Not even you. The last 3 words hung in the air, their weight unmistakable. She breathed in slowly. And what do you think? Damien stepped closer before he realized he was doing it. His eyes locked on hers. I think, he said quietly, that you walked into a world built to crush you, and you are still standing. Her heart stumbled. That was not in the contract. His hand lifted slightly, as if he meant to touch her cheek again, but he caught himself and let it drop. Get some rest, he said, turning away. Tomorrow will be difficult. She frowned. Why? Damien's shoulders tightened. Because Clara will not be the only person questioning this marriage. Others will come for you, and for me. She felt a chill trace down her spine. Then what do we do? Damien looked back at her, his eyes holding something raw and unguarded. We face it together, he said. At least for now. And even though she knew this was still a contract, still an arrangement destined to end, something inside her whispered that tomorrow might change everything. Morning sunlight filtered through the tall windows of the penthouse, but it did nothing to ease the heaviness sitting in her chest. She had barely slept after Damien's warning the night before, and when she stepped into the living area, she found him already dressed in a crisp charcoal suit, staring at his tablet with a frown deep enough to cut granite. He glanced up briefly as she entered. You should eat, he said, nodding toward the untouched breakfast laid out on the table. It is going to be a long day. The tension in his voice matched the tight set of his shoulders. She sat down quietly, pushing scrambled eggs around her plate before asking, Is it about the marriage? Damien exhaled through his nose and set the tablet aside. The board wants a meeting. They are demanding explanations. Some believe the marriage is a stunt. Others think it jeopardizes the company. She swallowed. Because of me. Because they do not know you, he corrected. And because they assume I make decisions for selfish reasons. She watched him carefully. Do you? His eyes flickered, a brief storm crossing his expression before he masked it again. Put on something professional, he said. You are coming with me. 2 hours later, she stood beside him in the gleaming lobby of Wolf Tower, her pulse drumming in her ears as they stepped into the private elevator. She smoothed the front of her blouse, her nerves twisting tighter with every floor they climbed. What do I even say to them? She whispered. You say nothing unless spoken to, Damien replied. His tone was firm, but not unkind. Just stay close to me. When the elevator doors opened, they walked into a glass-walled boardroom filled with sharp suits and colder eyes. Conversations halted immediately as they entered. A gray-haired board member stood up, adjusting his glasses as he inspected her like she was a discrepancy in a financial report. Mr. Wolf, he said, we did not expect you to bring your wife. Damien's fingers brushed hers under the table, a subtle gesture she did not expect. She belongs here, he said simply. A thin woman in a navy suit spoke next, her tone coated in false politeness. Forgive our curiosity, but the timing of this marriage is unusual. A sudden courthouse ceremony? No public announcement. Her voice sharpened. It feels impulsive. Reckless. Damien leaned back in his chair, expression cool. My personal life is not up for debate. Another board member scoffed. Everything is up for debate when shareholders start to ask questions. They will stop asking, Damien replied, when they see stability. The woman in navy folded her arms. Then show us stability. How did you two meet? His wife stiffened, her mind racing. She had rehearsed nothing. Damien answered smoothly. We met at a charity fundraiser. Which one? Someone asked suspiciously. Does it matter? Damien shot back, but she touched his arm lightly before he could escalate. The board members noticed. Each stare dug deeper. Then she spoke, her voice quiet but steady. It was the Hope Foundation dinner. Every head turned. Damien looked at her sharply, but she continued before he could interrupt. I was volunteering with the guest check-in team. Damien arrived late. He looked exhausted. A few people exchanged glances. She folded her hands to keep them from trembling. He asked for a moment alone, and we talked. He told me about the stress he was under, the pressure, the expectations. Her eyes lifted to Damien's, and something vulnerable flickered there. He was kind to me that night. Unexpectedly kind. A subtle shift rippled across the room. Doubt softened. Curiosity replaced suspicion. Damien cleared his throat, regaining control. Our relationship is real, he said, and I expect my board to respect my decisions. The meeting slowly transitioned into business, but she felt Damien's gaze lingering on her every few minutes, as if trying to decipher something he had not anticipated. When it finally ended, he ushered her into the hallway, closing the door behind them. You did not have to defend me, he said quietly. I told the truth, she replied. He studied her, his voice dropping lower. I do not remember telling you any of that. She held his gaze. You did not. But it is how you looked that night. Anyone could see it. Something shifted in him then, a quiet crack in the armor he wore so carefully. He stepped closer without meaning to. You are learning too much about me, he murmured. She did not step back. Maybe you are the one letting me. For a moment, neither of them moved, the hallway holding its breath. And even though she knew this marriage was built on lies and unfinished revenge, she could feel it unmistakably. The distance between them was beginning to break. The car ride back to the penthouse felt heavier than any board meeting. Damien sat beside her in the back seat, his posture tense, his gaze fixed on the skyline, as if the answers he needed were buried somewhere in the glass towers. She kept her hands folded in her lap, feeling the weight of what had happened. She had defended him. She had protected a man who intended to use her as a weapon against her own father, a truth she was trying hard not to think about. But something had shifted between them, something Damien clearly did not know how to handle. When they stepped inside the penthouse, the silence wrapped around them again, but it was different now. Not cold, not distant, just full. Damien removed his jacket and set it neatly on the back of a chair before turning to her. His voice was low, almost reluctant. You were impressive today. She let out a soft breath. You already said that. I did not say it like I meant it, he replied quietly. The admission caught her off guard, but before she could respond, his phone buzzed sharply on the counter. One glance at the screen made his expression harden. He stepped away to answer, his voice clipped. What do you want? She could not hear the person on the other end, but she saw the tension coil through Damien's shoulders like a tightening spring. No, he said sharply. This has nothing to do with you. Stay out of it. A pause. Then a low curse. I said stay out of it. He hung up with a force that made the glass on the counter rattle. She approached cautiously. Damien, is something wrong? He hesitated, the muscles along his jaw flexing. It was your father's former business partner. He thinks your father is using you to get close to me. She blinked, stunned. That is not true. I know, Damien said. His voice had softened, but the storm behind his eyes had not. But this is exactly what I warned you about. People will twist everything to their advantage. She took a slow breath. Then let them talk. You and I know the truth. Damien looked at her then, really looked at her, as if her calm surprised him more than the accusation. Do we? He asked. She opened her mouth, unsure how to respond, but a sudden knock at the penthouse door made both of them freeze. Damien stiffened instantly. Stay back, he said, stepping toward the door. She ignored the warning and followed him anyway, heart thudding. When he opened the door, Clara stood there, wearing a fitted coat and a smile that did not reach her eyes. I see you two had an eventful morning, she said as she swept inside without invitation. Damien's jaw tightened. Clara, this is not a good time. It never is with you, she said lightly, then turned her gaze to his wife. You are quite the actress. I almost believed that little story you told the board. She felt her cheeks warm, but she lifted her chin. I told the truth. Please, Clara scoffed. You think Damien goes to charity dinners to pour out his feelings to strangers? He barely talks to people he knows. Clara, Damien warned. She ignored him. You want to know why you are here, she said, stepping closer, her voice dropping. Damien married you to destroy your father. He wants to take everything from him. And you are the easiest access point. A sharp silence sliced through the room. Damien took one step forward, fury rising, but she was already staring at him, her pulse roaring in her ears. Is that true? Her voice trembled, even though she fought to keep it steady. Damien opened his mouth, but no words came out. Clara answered for him. He was going to use you, she said. Make your father confess. Humiliate him publicly. It was his plan all along. Her stomach twisted painfully. Damien, she whispered. This time he did speak, but the words were too slow, too late. It started that way, he said quietly. But things changed. Clara laughed. Did they? His wife stepped back from him, betrayal settling in her chest like ice. You said you wanted stability. You said you wanted respect. Damien moved toward her, desperation flickering in his eyes. I meant what I said last night. You do not deserve to be ruined. She swallowed hard, her voice breaking. But you were going to ruin me anyway. He reached for her, but she stepped out of reach. Her heart, the one she had promised herself not to trust to him, cracked quietly inside her chest. I cannot stay here, she whispered. And before Damien could stop her, she walked out the door, leaving him frozen in the doorway, realizing too late what he had truly destroyed. Rain had begun to fall by the time she stepped out of the building, soft at first, and then harder, drenching her hair and soaking through the thin fabric of her blouse. She did not care where she was going. She only knew she had to get away from him, away from the truth that had cracked her trust wide open. She reached the edge of the sidewalk before the weight of everything hit her all at once. Damien had planned to use her. Clara had not lied about that. And even if things had changed for him, the beginning still mattered, because it told her what she had meant to him when he first knocked on her door. Nothing. She wrapped her arms around herself, shivering as a cold gust of wind swept down the empty street. Across town, Damien stood frozen in the penthouse doorway long after she disappeared from sight, rain blowing in and soaking the threshold. Clara had already left, satisfied with the chaos she had caused, but Damien did not feel victory or justification. He felt fear that he had pushed her away for good. He grabbed his keys and ran to the elevator, stabbing the button repeatedly as if it would take him to her faster. He searched the sidewalks, the nearby streets, the lobby cameras, anything that would give him a direction. Nothing. She had vanished into the city. He drove the length of downtown, then toward her old neighborhood, his breaths coming faster with every empty corner he passed. Rain hammered against the windshield, blurring the lights into streaks of gold and red. Where are you? He whispered into the car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. He had never been afraid of losing anything. Not money, not power, not reputation, but losing her felt like standing at the edge of a cliff he had not realized he built with his own hands. When he finally found her, she was sitting on a bench outside a closed bakery, rain falling around her like a curtain. She looked small, exhausted, broken in a way that hit him straight in the chest. He stepped out of the car slowly, letting the rain soak him without caring. When she lifted her head, her eyes held more hurt than anger. Do not come closer, she said softly. He stopped where he was, his voice rough. I deserve that. I deserve all of it. But please listen. She looked away. You lied to me from the beginning. Yes, he said, his voice shaking. I married you to ruin your father. That is true. But I did not expect you to defend me. I did not expect you to stand in front of a boardroom and make them believe in us. I did not expect you to look at me like I was worth saving. Rain dripped from his hair, his suit, his lashes, but he did not blink. I am not asking you to forgive me, he continued. I am asking you to let me prove that the man who walked into your apartment that day is not the man standing in front of you now. She stared at him, her breath catching at the raw honesty in his voice. Why should I believe you? Damien swallowed hard. Because you changed me long before I realized I wanted to change. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The rain softened around them as though the world itself was waiting for her answer. She looked at Damien, really looked at him, standing there drenched and breathless, stripped of the arrogance and control he once wore like armor. For the first time, she saw not the billionaire who had married her for revenge, but the man who chased her through the city because losing her terrified him more than losing everything he owned. Her voice trembled when she finally spoke. If I come back with you, the contract ends. No more lies. No more plans. No more using anyone. Damien nodded instantly. The contract ends tonight. All of it. I will destroy every page. And my father? She whispered. I will not pursue anything against him, he said. Revenge does not fix what was broken. I see that now. She searched his face for any hint of deception, but there was none, only sincerity, steady and unwavering. Slowly, she stood from the bench, rain slipping down her hair like melting silver. Damien stepped closer, careful, as if afraid she might disappear again. If you come home, he said softly. You come home as my wife in truth, not in contract. Her breath caught. And what does that mean to you, Damien? He exhaled, the words raw and unguarded. It means I choose you. Not for strategy, not for revenge, not for appearances. I choose you because somewhere along the way, your kindness ruined every wall I built. And your kiss, his voice faltered as he looked at her lips. Your kiss made me want to be a man worthy of you. The last of her resistance melted. She stepped forward, taking his hand, and his breath shook as though the simple touch undid him completely. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly against his drenched suit, the rain falling around them in soft applause. When they finally returned to the penthouse, Damien placed the marriage contract on the marble counter. Without hesitation, he tore it in half, then again, until the pieces scattered like confetti across the floor. He faced her with quiet determination. From now on, there is only us. No conditions. No countdown. She smiled, warmth blooming in her chest. Then let us start over. Damien reached for her hand, bringing it to his lips. This time, he whispered, I marry you to love you. And under the soft glow of the city lights, their new beginning finally took shape. Not written in ink, not bound by paper, but sealed in a promise that needed no signature at all.